Hey everybody, welcome back. We spent a lot of time talking about what we need to learn about our snakes and our reptiles and so forth, and there's another interesting side of that, and that's what our snakes and what our animals can teach us about ourselves. So I thought that was a good topic to talk about today. So we'll get right into it when we get back on Intrepid Exotics. So a little bit of a different topic for today. Like I said, we all know that we need to teach ourselves about our animals and teach ourselves about our snakes and so forth in order to handle them correctly and be safe with them. But there's also a big component of that what we can learn about ourselves from dealing with these animals. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot to unpack, and I just want to kind of go into my personal experiences and how it's impacted me. And it's been pretty interesting. A little bit of my background, since nobody out there really knows me, is I'm former Army. I grew up around Northwest Indiana, Chicago, Gary area, and so forth. And I ended up living in a martial arts school for 2 years right after high school. So I grew up as a fighter. Joined the military. Went out to Bosnia in 1998 and seen what people did to each other over there. Followed that up with the war in Iraq in 2003, and again seen another episode of humanity at its not so finest. And currently, oddly enough, I work with a company that contracts to the local medical examiner's offices, and I transport for them. So I'm out on crime and accident scenes, typically helping the CSI folks finish up, getting the last of their photos, and then I'm transporting the decedents to the morgue. So I see, on a week-to-week basis, the absolute worst examples of human behavior. I see the worst things that human beings do to each other. There's no way to sugarcoat how gruesome some of this stuff is, and how badly some of these interactions between people end up coming out. Even how simple decisions sometimes can end up being devastating. Accidents and then things of that nature. So between that whole scope of experience there, one of the things that was a challenge for me first getting out of the military was learning how to communicate with civilians, because you get so used to, when you're in the military, operating at such a keyed up level, and you train with the same people all the time, and you get to the point where you can be out in the woods at night in pitch black and communicate crystal clearly without even saying a word, and everybody knows what to do and everybody's working together. So it can be really stressful when you come out to the civilian side and that communication is just gone. People aren't nearly as honest. You're just not you're not operating on the same level at all. So it can be a challenge. And that's why a lot of us come out, and I think that's why a lot of people really picture us as being arrogant jerks, and there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot that goes into it. But you may be wondering how all this stuff ties into snakes. Well, imagine for a second if you've had snakes for any period of time, a couple of years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever the case may be. Say for instance, you've got large snakes, big Burmese, big retics, anacondas, whatever you've got, monitor lizards. When you work with these animals, we go explicitly with the understanding that if anything bad happens, it's on us. It's our fault. If I'm working with my snakes today and one of them bites me, it's my fault. End of conversation. I can't say that the snake was having a bad day. I can't say that the snake was being grumpy. I can say, I misread something, I did something wrong, and I got hit. Imagine if we approached people in the same way all the time. when I'm approaching snakes in my enclosure, I need to be able to look at him and say, is he sleeping? How do I need to go about waking him up? Is he nervous? Is he acting defensive? How do I need to approach him? Are they hungry? What do I need to do to turn that off? What's going on in the snake's head determines what I do. Now, if we put that same effort when we approach another person, and looking at them and just taking a moment to key in on what their frame of mind is and what's going on with them, and then approach them appropriately, imagine how many fewer calls I would end up taking. What I've learned from managing snakes, and I was really fortunate to have an opportunity to work at a facility that had hundreds of them, adults, varying different dispositions, and I got hit a couple times. I've made a couple mistakes, and I've gotten a couple pretty nasty bites in the process there, and I've gotten tagged a couple times at home too. But one thing that you learn is if you take the time to first understand when you're encountering somebody new that everybody has a certain level of anxiety about them. They want to be liked. They want to make sure they're not offending anybody. They may have something going on in their personal life that's just ripping them apart right now, and they're putting on that fake smile, and they either don't want the attention, they don't want to be burdened, they don't want to burden anybody else with it. And you can, if you pay attention, you can kind of pick up on those things, and it may keep us from misconstruing maybe somebody being a little short, maybe being a little scatterbrained and things like that. Allow us to be a little bit more forgiving in the way we approach people, because when you approach a snake, it's really important that you do all of those things, because if you don't, you're going to suffer an immediate consequence from it. My 14-foot male over there, if I don't pay attention to every one of those things, then that 65-pound constrictor is going to sink all 6 rows of them teeth into my arm immediately. And I'm going to pay an instant price for it. And that's something that we don't have in our dealings with other people. It happens so much more under the surface. And it's a slow, long-term buildup. You don't see it very often where when you do the wrong thing with somebody, they immediately hit just like that. It happens over time. And, we've got the ability to process those things, so it'll stew and stew. And there's people that have really severe psychological problems because of things like that. Because their personality just tends to make people uncomfortable, so they always get that back in return. I know somebody really well that's kind of like that. Not a bad person, got a good heart, has never been socially, really adept, I guess you could say. And, what you put out is what you get back. So that's what he's gotten back pretty much his whole life. And it's really hurt him. One thing that a lot of us former soldiers run into when we hit the civilian world, most of us don't know what we want to be when we grow up. And that stood tenfold for me. I went in, like I said, I was a fighter. I wanted to run around, kick in doors, blow things up, jump out of airplanes, jump out of helicopters, run around through the woods for weeks at a time, and, shoot big guns, fire rockets, all that stuff. And, every little boy's dream, I guess. And, I found myself in my element when I was teaching somebody. I spent some time, teaching martial arts in the Army, and would do it kind of on the side. I was out in Phoenix. I coached for a little while and things like that. But you know, that was what really fired me up, was that interaction and teaching and working with people and things like that, and seeing their eyes light up and just seeing their energy level go up every time they did something right. You know, you watch people push through and fighting to learn stuff and really struggling sometimes to get it right, and then that satisfaction that you get from seeing something finally click with somebody, and just seeing them all of a sudden get it, and they've got it, and you know, that's how you build people up. You know, you can't give somebody confidence. You can point them down the road to it. You can teach them. You can tell them. But the only way you get confidence is by doing. So I don't care how many YouTube videos you watch about keeping snakes. Until you actually do it, it's just that there's nothing tangible there. Which is why most of us, just about anybody I've heard, you know, our advice to people is to find a mentor, find somebody that has these animals and can let you get your hands on them and let you actually do it. But that was something that I had lost for a long time, because, you know, after my knee surgery, I couldn't really do what I used to do, and it was a big part of me getting out of the military. And you know, I try to get back into it from time to time, but I mean, quite frankly, I spend most of my life in pain. I'm ready to try and mitigate it as much as I can. But as soon as I got into reptiles and, you know, started keeping these big snakes, and, you know, started inviting people over to see them, interact, and so forth, and kind of, you know, like I said, putting them in people's hands and just seeing, you get that same feeling of, man, I just opened up this person's life just a little bit more, opened up their realm of experience just a little bit more, and made their life a little bit better by exposing them to something that's just really cool, which is a big part of why I'm doing these videos. You know, you can get on here, you can find bigger animals in mine, bigger collections in mine, people that are more knowledgeable than I am about them, but those people are a really kind of small percentage of the whole population. You know, keeping big reptiles isn't a real common thing. I mean, there's a lot of people that do it, but I mean, if you look at the population of the country, out of the 330 some million people that we have, how many of us really do it? You know, so I mean, there's always an opportunity out there. You know, as long as you make sure that what you're putting out is accurate, you know, and you're always bouncing it off of other people to ensure that you're not saying the wrong things, giving the wrong advice, putting out the wrong information. You know, even basic level stuff like this can be really beneficial to a lot of people. So that's, you know, why I put it out there. And like I said, I think reptile keeping in particular is something that is so much different from keeping any other kind of animal. You know, whether it be dogs, cats, horses, hamsters, anything else. There's something about giant snakes, monitor lizards, and they've got this combination of intellect and instinct, and we've got the ability to tap into that if we do it just right, and become as close to friends with these animals as you can possibly get, and have some really cool experiences with animals that scare the hell out of most people. And it's a really neat thing to experience. And we do that, like I said, first through taking personal responsibility for everything that happens, and then taking the time to understand what's going on with something else before we act. How many problems would that fix with our entire society if everybody did that? Because one thing that I've found is that, especially here lately, the last 4, 5, 6 years, something like that, typically here the last few years, you see a lot of people who otherwise think pretty much the same, having a lot of really bad disagreements and a lot of bad blood between each other over really topical, superficial stuff. And I think that if both people would invest the same amount of energy into reading the other person and what their real intent is before an interaction, and then approaching people appropriately because of that, because of what they see and not what they predetermine, then I think you could do away with so much of the strife that we run into today. There's something about something really special about this kind of relationship that you build with these animals, and I think you can really learn a lot, like I said, about yourself, about overcoming your own fears, about managing the balance that all of us have to keep when we're keeping these animals. The balance between confidence and caution that's got to be there in order for things to work right. That balance between being afraid and then having the courage to do something that you're afraid of, knowing that this is what you need to do in order to accomplish this result. It's the whole dynamic for keeping these animals really goes a lot deeper than just having an animal and trying not to get bit. And another thing, when I got out of the military, the whole process of me realizing that I really couldn't do physically what I used to do, it was tough. But what made it easier for me is that I had a shift in my thinking as I was getting out. And it really kind of dawned on me once I started thinking about what it was going to be like not fighting, not thinking about fighting constantly in one way, shape, or form. Once that started to settle on me that I needed to shift that, I lost any desire to ever hurt anything, to ever kill anything. It's one of the reasons why I don't live feed my animals. I have killed prey items before so that I could feed my snakes. I understand that there's that part of it. I don't enjoy it. I feel bad about it every time I do it. I don't care whether it's a rat or a rabbit or what. I feel anytime I kill anything. And so, I don't take a whole lot of pleasure in that at all. Outside of knowing my snakes are taken care of. But there's like I said, there was that shift that took place. So when I first got into keeping snakes, one thing that I noticed is that a lot of the older keepers, a lot of the more popular people in the reptile community, they're all very intelligent people, and they've all got unique understandings that a lot of people don't have. As far as not only dealing with their animals, but I notice a lot of them have a really deeper insight into people as well. One of my big draws to it, man, because when I first started keeping snakes, of course you want to learn about the animals and so forth, and the more you learn, that's the key, is the more you learn, the more you should realize how much you don't know. I still feel like there's so much to know about it that you should be able to start every day with the expectation that you're going to learn something new. And I don't think there's too many things that's truer for than reptiles. When I approach one of my snakes, it's up to me to look at them, see whether they're hungry, see whether they're sleeping, you know, see whether I'm making them nervous or not, and you know, to act accordingly. If I'm making a snake nervous and I don't back off a little bit and give it time to get comfortable, there's a chance it's going to get defensive and strike at me. You know, it's the same thing in dealing with people. You know, if people are naturally, and people are, they're naturally fearful, naturally apprehensive, and you know, even the strongest of us are apprehensive in, you know, certain social situations. So there's always that level of tension there, you know, within ourselves. You know, whether it be a job interview or whatever it is, and we're wanting to make, you know, a good impression on somebody or wanting to be liked, and there's that natural defensiveness there. And you know, if you approach people the same way as you do your snake, and be able to tap into that a little bit and understand that, you know, somebody may not be at a really good comfort level, and soften the way you approach them a little bit, then you know, that whole encounter, that whole experience can be better. And it's just the same way as building positive threads with your animals. You know, if you work on building those positive threads with people, you're going to have the same result. You know, you're going to have good experiences with them. And it's kind of an off topic, you know, reptile keepers. You know, I know a lot of people watch this and they want to see the big snakes and they want to see all the handling and everything. But we all know that anybody that deals with large constrictors, large dangerous reptiles, there's a lot of psychology that goes into it. You know, a lot of overcoming your own apprehensions. So for instance, with my Nile monitor, you know, the whole relationship and the whole thing that makes a good relationship between a person and a reptile is that mutual trust and that mutual comfort level. If I want, you can never expect it, but I want my Nile monitor to feel secure and to trust me and to not be afraid of me. And in order to accomplish that, I've got to do things that put myself at risk. You know, for instance, you typically don't want to run in and reach around over top of them and swoop down on them, pick them up and stuff like that, because you're afraid of getting bit. You need to approach them from the front by their face, where they can see everything coming, where they're in a dominant position and you're coming in, I mean, pretty much towards their mouth. And, you know, you start interacting with them at that level. And there's that level of trust that's got to be there, that, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm putting this animal in the best possible position to feel as secure as you can. And let's hope it works this time. You may get bit. It happens. But it's one of those things where you can't expect an animal to trust you if you handle it in such a way that you have absolutely zero trust in that animal. That's why you won't see a whole lot of venomous snakes being, you know, as tamed down and as easy to handle as constrictors, because you can't trust them to any degree. You know, you've got to handle them all in a fearful manner. And that's why when you see you see all of the videos of folks handling venomous snakes, man, they're always striking. And, you know, that's because we just cannot handle them in such a fashion that, you know, it generates that same level of trust. Now with your constrictors, you'll see it all the time. 16, 18-foot snakes hanging around with 5-6-year-old kids, just cruising around, being nice and comfortable, because we're able to have that kind of trust. The risk isn't as high. So, you know, we're able to build that relationship and leave ourselves open and kind of put that animal in a better position. So that makes them less fearful. You know, and it's really the same thing with people. You know, if if we get into the habit of leaving ourselves a little vulnerable and trying to elevate people and put them in a little bit higher position than ourselves, then we're going to find that ends up being a more trusting relationship. And it's just like anything else. Bad things can happen. It's just like with dealing with snakes. Bad things can happen. But just because bad things can happen, it doesn't mean that you do the wrong things. Just because bad things can happen doesn't mean that you don't try to do what's right and do what you know works. And you may have challenges. Not every snake's easy to deal with. Not every person's easy to deal with. The one thing that's a lot different between snakes and dealing with people is snakes don't have malice. That's the biggest thing. That's probably the only real divider there between, being able to deal with people the same way we deal with our animals. I see the absolute worst that people will do to each other, and the absolute worst things that can happen to a person. And they are all of them make anything that a snake can do to you pale in comparison. This isn't story time, but if you can, anything that you can imagine as being the absolute worst thing that another human being can do to one, I've seen it, and it puts a lot of things into perspective. Every time I'm out there and every time I'm working with people, every time I'm on an overdose scene, if there's family around there, I make no bones about pulling all of that family off to the side and saying, look guys, this is what happens. Were you doing it with them? Do you have any friends that are doing it? Because ultimately, this is the end of the road for just about all of you that are hooked on this stuff. And I do my best to encourage people to learn from the things that we're all experiencing together out there. I don't experience it at the same level. I've got no emotional attachment to it, and I'm accustomed to managing things like this. But a lot of people are seeing this for the first time. A lot of the cops are seeing this for the first time. So it's something that really, they're all good opportunities to really drive a point home. So I talk a lot about my goals with all the videos that I put out and things like that. They're kind of they're multifaceted. One, I really enjoy talking with my animal, or talking. I really enjoy talking about my animals, and I talk with them too. Don't judge. If you've got animals, you talk to them as well. We all do. So it's a little bit more mundane with us because snakes can't hear us. Niles over there can hear me just fine. Of course, he doesn't listen. But there's a couple things about the videos that I put out. I'm not a big reptile breeder. I haven't been doing it for decades. But I have been pretty fortunate to have had some exposure to some really awesome animals and learned from some really skilled people. And I've got a small collection here at the house. But one thing that I find is that even a small collection like mine, as far as the general public is concerned, is jaw-dropping. Most people don't get exposure to 12, 14-foot snakes, 5-foot lizards and things like that, especially out here in North Carolina. You just don't see those things. So it's always, I get a lot of personal joy from, inviting people over and, putting a 40-pound snake in their hand for the first time and just watching their eyes light up and seeing people, helping people to generate the same feeling for the animals that I've got. That feeling of awe for lack of a better word. And it's so I want to take that part of that experience as much as I can and kind of push it out there for the world. There's all kinds of guys out there that have got zoos and hundreds of different species and things like that. And maybe one of these days I'll be fortunate enough to be able to do that. I think it would be awesome. I would love to be spending my days working completely with the animals as opposed to the field that I'm in now. But it is what it is for right now. Okay, so if you've made it this far, congratulations. I know it's a long video, and I appreciate you taking the time. I really do. Love these animals. So much we need to learn about them. And like I said, so much they can teach us about ourselves. And today starts my week off. So hit like if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. Get some notifications, because on my weeks that I'm working, it's really difficult for me to get anything out because I'm on call 24/7. My weeks off, I'm going to pump out as much content as I can, try and get you guys out as much exposure to the beasts here as I can. So again, guys, thanks for hanging out, and looking to see you out there. Have a good day. We'll talk to you next time on Intrepid Exotics.